Without objection.
Mr. President, I asked unanimous consent to address the Senate as if in morning business.
Also without objection.
I thank the President. Mr. President, earlier this afternoon, there was a vote on a two-week continuing resolution and to fund the government, and was divided along party lines. I voted for the passage of H.R. 1, which was a House-passed continuing resolution, which will fund the federal government for the remainder of the fiscal year. And I supported this measure because I believe it's a critical first step toward reining in our deficit and debt and putting us back on a path to fiscal solvency. And I appreciate the hard work of my colleagues in the House, and their efforts required a lot of compromise and tough decisions. And I supported the passage of H.R. 1, but I do have serious concerns with the defense-related spending of this bill. The defense-related spending on H.R. 1 is not sufficient for us to carry out our responsibilities to the men and women who are serving in the military and fulfill our national security requirements. Therefore, if we are going to embark on another two-week continuing resolution, as it appears that reports indicate may be the case, then I will be compelled to propose an amendment which will then fund our nation's national security requirements for the remainder of the year. That number, as I have determined it, is approximately $535 billion normal defense appropriations and $159 billion for war funding known as overseas contingency operations. Now, Mr. President, the Secretary of Defense who I have disagreed with from time to time, which I think is natural and appropriate, I believe is perhaps the finest Secretary of Defense that has ever served this nation in many respects. I'm sure there are others who are outstanding, but in recent memory, I have not met a person that has led our Defense Department with the qualities of leadership and dedication as Secretary Gates. So I pay close attention, and I hope that all of us do, particularly the fact that we have Americans in harm's way in 2 wars and the turmoil that now is present in the Middle East, in the Arab world, in the Maghreb. So the Secretary of the Navy has said, the Secretary of Defense has said unequivocally that he cannot guarantee that we are defending this nation's vital national security interest if we continue on a 2-week by 2-week by 2-week sequence. There's not the kind of funding nor the kind of assurance to the men and women who are serving that we can adequately train, equip, and make them fight at their highest efficiencies and capabilities. Now, I disagree, and I will list some of those areas where I disagree with the funding requirements, and I don't agree with the number. The Secretary of Defense has said $540 billion. I think we can do it with $535 billion. But the fact is that we can't subject our nation's national security to a 2-week by 2-week process. It just is not the way the Defense Department can function and this nation can defend itself and its vital national security interests. We owe it to the men and women who are serving in harm's way as we speak. So the bills that need to be, aspects of the Defense Appropriations Bill that need to be taken away, eliminated, are $300 million for medical research, and I'm sure that the medical research is important, but it has nothing to do with national defense. In it is $15 million for peer-reviewed Alzheimer research, $150 million for peer-reviewed breast cancer research, $12.8 million for peer-reviewed lung cancer research, $20 million for peer-reviewed ovarian cancer research, $80 million for peer-reviewed prostate cancer research, and $4.8 million for multiple sclerosis. All are worthy causes. None have anything to do with defending this country. If they want to be funded, and I'm sure they deserve to be funded in many respects, they should come out of the Health and Human Services appropriations, not out of defense. What's happened around here over the years is the Willie Sutton syndrome. They once asked the famous bank robber, Willie Sutton, why he robbed banks, and he said that's where the money is. So various special interests have wanted funding for various projects, either good or bad, or programs, either good or bad, that have nothing to do with defense. We cannot afford those anymore. If we want to fund a program, it should come out of the appropriate area of responsibility of the Appropriations Committee. Both of these bills, the bill includes $70 million for private organizations, $24 million for the Red Cross, $1.2 million for Special Olympics, $20 million for youth mentoring grants, all worthy causes, all not defense-related. It's $250 million for improvements to local schools that are not part of the Department of Defense school system. If they need to be funded, take it out of the proper appropriations monies. Equally troubling is the way they make objectionable changes to the Overseas Contingency Operations funding. The account, the OCO, the Overseas Contingency Operations funds, are specifically for Iraq and Afghanistan. Both the bills cut the Iraq Security Force funding by $500 million, but they also shift funding for 9 F-18 Hornets from the base to the Overseas Contingency Operations, despite the fact that we have not lost an F-18, and that's $500 million. It shifts $500 million in funding for UAVs, where they were properly requested. They should not be designated Overseas Contingency Operations 20 additional missile defense interceptors for $190 million, and more than $37 million to fund support to the southwest border for the National Guard. I strongly support funding for the southwest border of to have it secured, and I will continue to advocate for that, but it does not apply to overseas contingency operations. So as we proceed, I intend to work to remove the non-defense related spending from these bills, restore that funding to actual DoD priorities, including full funding for our troops in combat and the costs needed to maintain and restore their equipment. Now, Mr. President, I don't know if the government's going to be shut down or not. I don't know whether there will be compromise. I don't know if we will engage in entitlement reform and all of the different scenarios that we could draw as to what's going to happen here in high noon and great drama in our nation's capital. We cannot forget that we are in two wars, that we have 100,000 troops in Afghanistan, approximately 50,000 in Iraq. And those are rough numbers, not to mention other civilians and members of the diplomatic corps, other parts of the U.S. government. We cannot force them to live 2 weeks by 2 weeks by 2 weeks and not be sufficiently funded. And I will be glad to engage with my colleagues in vigorous debate. And maybe they are able to find more ways to save money from our defense spending. And I'm sure they're there, and I look forward to working with them. But as the Secretary of Defense has tried to make it as clear as possible to the members of Congress, and I wish the President would weigh in more heavily than this, we cannot continue functioning and preserve our national security this way. That's why, if we do another 2-week continuing resolution, and I will be coming to the floor to propose an amendment to provide funding for our nation's defense for the remainder of the year. And I take a back seat to no one in my zeal to cut unnecessary spending. I'm aware we have mortgaged our children's futures. I know that we can't stop spending the way we are. But the first priority of government, the first priority, is to ensure the safety and security of its citizens. That's why we must appropriately fund our Department of Defense and all its associated functions, and especially provide the equipment and training and protection as much as we can to the men and women who are serving in sacrifice so that the rest of us can live free. Mr. President, I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Member from Alabama.
Oh, yes. Quorum call be dispensed with.
Shall be without objection.
Mr. President, we've had our votes this afternoon on the continuing resolution proposal from the House. The Senate did not approve that, did not have the 60 votes necessary to accept that, and the Democratic proposal, which I would suggest does nothing about the debt, also failed. I guess there were 4 or 5 party defections. If you take it what direction those defections went, all of those defections went to the more conservative side, in that several thought that the House reductions in spending were not enough, and several thought, Democrat colleagues who thought that the Democratic majority leader's proposal did not go far enough. I would just say that what we need to do, and it's very, very important that we achieve it, is that we need to move toward a a gradual, credible, sustained, mature reduction of the deficits this country has faced. And that takes some tough decision-making. It doesn't require us to act in an extreme or drastic way, but it means sustained, serious changes in the trajectory on which we're heading. And I would just note that the House proposal that came over proposed reducing our discretionary, non-defense discretionary spending $61 billion over the rest of the fiscal year. That's, if you take only the discretionary account, that amounts to about a 6% reduction in it. If you take the entire federal spending, it's less than 2% reduction in entire federal spending. So it's utterly implausible that this reduction in spending is so significant that will impact adversely our economy today. That's one of the arguments that they're throwing out, particularly in light of the fact that these don't consider the fact that we're dealing with outlays, and a lot of that money won't even be spent in this fiscal year. It'll be spent in the next year or two as you build a project, a road or something that takes several years to complete. So the actual reduction in outlay in this year won't be that significant, and is just not going to reduce the fragile growth rate that we're in. What it does do, though, is save $61 billion out of this year's appropriations. And over a period of 10 years, that will result in approximately $860 billion in savings, because it reduces the baseline by this amount, 61, and it carries out each of the 10 years of a $61 billion reduction, plus the interest saved on all this debt. Since all of this money is borrowed, we're so deeply in debt, any reduction just reduces our debt, it reduces our interest payment, it puts us on a sound path. I do not believe the House sent us anything that is reckless or dangerous or extreme. The Majority Leader yesterday said it was reckless and used those kind of pejorative terms. It's not. It's a reasonable step that has a significant impact, pushing $1 trillion, actually over 10. Do a few more little things, you'd save $1 trillion on our debt over 10 years, and that's significant. And I would point out, Mr. President, we've had substantial increases in our budgets in the last 2 years. In 2010, 2011, over the 2008 budget proposal, we've added 25% increases in spending in these discretionary programs. Some of them have received substantially more than that. So taking down these numbers will not put us into the poorhouse. It's not going to substantially alter the nature of the very republic that we are here to serve, nor the government that's supposed to serve the people. It's not going to savage our government. It's not going to savage programs. For example, these reductions that we voted on, if they become law, $61 billion over the rest of this fiscal year, would bring us still above the 2008 levels by 4.3%. 2008, we were spending $378 billion on these programs. If this reduction were to be accomplished, the spending for the rest of this year, would be $394 billion. That's more than we were just spending in 2008, and I believe it's a reasonable reduction. Now, I suppose after this vote that leaders and wise heads and people I affectionately call masters of the universe will all get together and they'll start deciding what we're going to do. well, you didn't win your vote, and we didn't win our vote, and so let's just sit down here and let's just divide up the pie, and you give a little bit more, and we don't want to cut too much spending, you know, and we'll just not agree to anything like these spending levels. I think that would be a mistake. I believe the American people in this last election were very clear that they expected us to do something about this reckless Washington spending. It was dominant in the election. There was a shellacking in this election of the big government, big spenders. They went down all over the country. Was it 87 new House members elected, the biggest surge in years, every one of them virtually promising to contain the reckless spending in Washington. So I can't understand what it is that people don't comprehend about the nature of the circumstances we're in. 40 cents of every dollar we spend today is borrowed. Every economist has testified, has said that we're on an unsustainable path. Mr. Erskine Bowles testified, former President Clinton's former chief of staff, a successful businessman himself, the head of the Debt Commission, along with Alan Simpson, former senator, and he said we could have a debt crisis in 2 years, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, on the rate we're going. Their joint statement said this country has never been in a situation which we have such a predictable crisis. And Senator Simpson declared he thought we could have a debt crisis in less than a year. He said, I think it's less than a year, not 2 years. Alan Greenspan in January told the Wall Street Journal there was a little better, but not much more than a 50-50 chance that we would have a debt crisis in 2 to 3 years. These are ominous warnings. You can't spend $3.8 trillion and bring in $2.2 trillion and think you can continue that any time soon. It's the largest deficit in the history of the American Republic. And the President's budget he just submitted to us projects no budget in 10 years less than $600 billion. And the last 3 years of his 10-year budget, those deficits are going up to $900 billion. It's the wrong trends. This is not a course we can sustain. We have to get off of it. We could be reaching the precipice sooner than we think, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. If we don't get off this path, we need to take action now. There's one opportunity. That's this continuing resolution, and which allows us to make some reductions, enough to send a message that there is a sufficient votes in this Congress to reverse the path we're on. Is there sufficient votes? I believe there is. Partisanship was in these last 2 votes. We know that. People were pressured on both sides, but the people who didn't follow party line were moving on to the right side, the more conservative, restrained side of spending. So I think that suggests there's some momentum out there to do something other than just split the baby on this, how much we're going to reduce spending. The Majority Leader's proposal is really a $4.6 billion reduction, less than 1/2% of the discretionary budget and a mere fraction of the total federal spending this year. That's nothing. So the choice is, are we going to do nothing? Or are we going to do something? Are we going to listen to the warnings that we're facing a predictable crisis financially or not? So we can do this. This is not going to be a dramatic reduction in spending. Frankly, I'd like to see it go a good bit lower, as a number of people I know in the Senate feel. But most of us felt like It was significant. It puts us on a downward path. It saves $61 billion this year, $850 billion over 10. That's a pretty good amount to save in 7 months of this fiscal year. We come back next year and we do more and better work, and we're going to have to bring entitlements into the discussion, but the President's going to have to step up on that. If he's going to oppose that, nothing's going to pass on entitlements, that's for sure. So we need some leadership, and we can move this thing in the right direction. So I'm disappointed that there were not more votes for the House proposal, but at least on the Republican side, it got every Republican vote except a few who felt it didn't go far enough in reducing spending. And I believe that the message needs to be to whoever's meeting in these secret chambers without the American people and without, I won't be in there, I'm sure. They'll be meeting over there and they're making these plots. They need to know we're not just looking for any token cuts. We need to do something that's significant. We need to stay with the House number. That's what we need to do. It would be so good for this country. The whole world would say, this new Congress, that was a noticeable step. They actually reduced spending. Maybe they are in the United States ready to get their house in order. Maybe we don't mind continuing to buy their bonds. Maybe they'll be able to honor their debts without debasing their currency. Maybe it's a good investment. I hope that's what we need to be saying, because otherwise we could be in a situation in which our debt surges, the interest on our debt surges, and the value of our currency is debased and put us on the road to political as well as economic decline. So, Mr. President, I thank the Chair for the opportunity to share these remarks. As ranking Republican on the Budget Committee, we've been wrestling with these issues. I thank Senator Conrad, the chairman. He's had some good hearings. We've had some good witnesses and good testimony. But it's time for action, not just talk. We need to do something. This is the bill that's before us. This CR, it's a vehicle by which we can speak to the American people, speak to the financial markets, speak to the entire world that the United States realizes that our path is an unsustainable one, and we're going to do something about it. We are moving off that path. We're going to take the hard road, and it'll be a tougher road for a while, but it's the road to prosperity. It's the road to growth. It's the road to more jobs. Excessive debt slows down the economy, as Rogoff and Reinhardt's book and studies show, as Secretary Geithner testified in the Budget Committee. It's already slowing our growth, he acknowledged, and he's afraid we could also have a debt crisis, an adverse incident that is exacerbated by the very high levels of debt that we're under. Mr. President, I thank the Chairman to yield the floor.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
After the Senate is out at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Education Secretary Arne Duncan will testify about his department's 2012 budget. That'll be here on C-SPAN 2. Up next here in the Senate, the chamber could take up a bill to encourage innovation in high-tech small businesses. But earlier today, senators voted down two versions of the fiscal 2011 spending bill. As we wait for a senator to speak, here's more on those votes this afternoon.
With us is Michael O'Brien of the Hill. What do today's test votes in the Senate reveal about any potential for a compromise on federal spending?
Well, they reveal right now that there is no compromise on spending. I think that's the fairly obvious point. What these sort of demonstrated was that both the Democratic proposal and the Republican proposal are not viable in their current form. They can't get the votes in the Senate. So it sort of points to a moment where Democratic and Republican leaders, with the aid of the Obama administration, are going to have to find some place in the middle between those two proposals.
Is there any middle ground senator out there, or a group of senators that either side is looking to work with?
Well, there's this group of six, a group of six members, 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, who sat on President Obama's Fiscal Commission. Now, what they're working on is sort of a longer-term spending deal that would bring down the deficit and debt over time. However, Senator Charles Schumer from New York, a leading Democrat in the Senate, said this morning that that sort of approach kind of provides the framework for a deal, so that sort of bipartisan spirit. Whether or not that's going to come into fruition, we'll see.
And you reported on Senator Schumer's remarks from earlier today that the senator called for what he, quote, reset in the budget fight. What is he looking for particularly? What's he calling for?
Well, he's saying that any approach to both the short-term and long-term spending should take a look at a variety of things. So revenue raisers, reductions in mandatory spending, so programs like health care or Medicare or Social Security, although he didn't specifically mention that last one, as well as cuts in domestic discretionary spending. Democrats complain that this current spending bill is solely focused on domestic discretionary spending and cuts too heavily from that, which is a key point of contention.
So reading the tea leaves on Chuck Schumer's comments, does he seem to indicate that everything now should be on the table?
Well, you know, we saw a statement from Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, who said that a number of options should be on the table. He released this afternoon after this vote, except for Social Security. Democrats are very wary of touching that traditional third rail, and they know they'd be under a lot of pressure from their liberal base if they do.
Where's the White House in all of this?
Well, the White House is sort of keeping its distance and doing its part behind closed doors. Vice President Biden called Speaker Boehner today, as well as Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. He tried to reach Senator Reid but failed, and they're sort of guiding things. However, Jay Carney, the White House press secretary, did get a question this afternoon and said, you know, given the question whether they should sort of restart, like Senator Schumer has said, and take a look at all options, the White House said that they'd prefer to just focus on domestic discretionary spending at this point.
Okay, the current short-term spending bill expires next Friday, March 18th, so what's going to happen?
Well, there's going to be several options and scenarios. If the government runs out of money on March 18th, it would face a shutdown. That's almost what we had last Friday, March 4th, and what happened last week, of course, was they extended funding for another 2 weeks. Republicans have said that's a possibility if they don't reach a deal. Not everybody is thrilled about that possibility, but I don't think anybody, at least from a political standpoint, wants a shutdown. However, if they don't come to an agreement of some sort, they face a very tough choice between letting the government shut down or doing another one of these continuing resolutions.
Michael O'Brien covering the spending debate on Capitol Hill, and you can read his articles at thehill.com. Thanks for joining us.
Anytime.
Mr. President.